All right, good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining me. Happy Friday. We'll go ahead and get started here. If you've got your questions, you can post them below the video if you're on a smaller screen like a phone. If you're on a larger screen like a computer, you should see the chat box there to the right of the video. All you have to do is click, type your message here, where it says type your message here, or it might say like join the conversation or something like that. Um, you just click that, and then it'll prompt you to um, type in your first name and last initial, and then you can just type your question in there, and then we'll get answered live here in the office hours. I will be on here until noon Eastern time, a whole hour. So let's go ahead and get started here with the first question. So Alan says, Q, I tried your dry erase suggestion yesterday using my 8-iron. Very interesting idea. I assume the dot on the ball should be on the equator of the ball, facing away from the target. After hitting a few shots, redotting in between, the mark on my club face was generally slightly above the middle groove line and slightly towards the hosel. Overall, ball flight and sound seemed decent in general. What is causing contact higher on the hosel of the club face, and how should someone try to get closer to the sweet spot? So first, let's explain exactly what you're talking about with the dry erase thing, because I'm guessing people are probably wondering what the heck I'm talking about. So basically what it is, this is a way that you can check your strikes on the face. This really works great if you have a club with a finish like this. Most of us are going to have irons with kind of this chrome or kind of silverish metallic kind of finish on there. I think my irons are more like a matte kind of like silver finish, but this works really well on that. You could also use foot powder spray. This is what we recommend. Dr. Scholl's Odorex, blue and yellow can here. You can get this at about any pharmacy. They also sell stuff that's called Strike Spray. You can only get it online. You gotta buy 3 cans at a time as well. It's a hair more expensive per ounce. It's really not that much more expensive than this, but you have to buy 3 cans. So this is like $5 or $6. So definitely recommend that. But generally, I like the dot method a little bit more for checking your strike location, for irons especially, because when you use the foot powder spray to check that, if you're hitting on a mat and there's moisture in the mat or something like that, that can rub it off and you won't be able to see what's going, won't be able to see where you hit it. Or if you're hitting off a real turf, you take that divot, there's a lot of moisture or something like that, it might wipe it off as well. So if you use the dot method, you're pretty much guaranteed that you're going to be able to see it, even if some moisture and things like that come into play. So the way that it works is you take a dry erase marker. The marker that I recommend is an Expo. That's just the best brand of dry erase markers that I have found that's readily available. And ideally, it would have the bullet tip. Typically, they're going to have the chisel tip, which works fine as well. But the bullet tip works just a little bit better because it's more of a rounded top to it, which is better to fill in the dimple of the ball. The chisel tip is more of a point, which is fine, but it just makes it a little bit more difficult. So anyway, all you do is you take your dry erase marker, and I don't recommend this particular one. This is a neon one. It's not going to show up that great, but a black dry erase marker or blue, a darker color is going to show up really, really easily. Red works fine too. So basically, you take it, you fill up a dimple on the ball, and then when you set up the ball, you just want to make sure that dimple is or that dot is going to make contact with the face when you hit it. So basically, you want it opposite of the target. Now, one thing that Alan mentioned was he assumes it should be at the equator of the ball. And really what you want to do is you want it to kind of match the loft of the club. So the higher the loft of the club, the more you're going to angle it down. So like this is a wedge. So I wouldn't want to have it right there, because if I come in and if you think about it, if I come in like this and I contact the face and the dot is up here, but the contact is more like this part of the ball, right? Well, that's going to make the contact point look higher than what it actually was. And that's probably why you're getting those high looking strikes on the face. So that's not anything wrong you're doing in your swing, most likely. It's just most likely that you're setting up the dot a little bit too high. I probably didn't mention that. That's my fault when I first went over this when you saw me demonstrate it before. So yeah, we just want to angle it down a little bit so that way it kind of matches the loft of the club. If you were doing it with like a 3-wood or a lower lofted club, you definitely want to angle it more toward where the equator would be. But for a higher lofted clubs, you'd want to angle it down to kind of match the loft, and that will allow you to see exactly where it is. That's kind of the only drawback to the dot method, is kind of making sure that you're angling it down the right amount. The foot power spray, if you do that, it's just going to show exactly where it hits on the face. For driver, foot power spray is really what I recommend. The dot method just isn't going to work that great on drivers, because most of the drivers these days are like black, right? The metal is too dark. You're not going to be able to see stuff. Now they do make like white markers and things like that, and you could try to do it with that. I've never tried that. I do have like these white markers. I've never tried it, like these chalk markers. I'm sure it would work just fine. I just never tried it. But foot power spray works really well. Obviously, you're not hitting the ground or no moisture is getting on the face. I think the foot power spray works great. So the question is, how do we move around the strike? Now, really simply, the way that we do that is we adjust our feel to get the desired result that we want. So, Alan, in your case, you're saying that you're hitting it a little high on the face and toward the heel. Now, the high on the face, like I said, you're probably not actually hitting it high on the face. You're probably just angling the dot too high. So there's your fix there, right? Just angle it down to match the loft. And then to get it off the heel, what we're going to do is we're going to change our intention to hitting it off the toe, right? So I'm going to line up the way that I normally would. And I'm going to intentionally hit that ball off the toe. And what will likely happen is it will move my strike more to the middle of the face. Now, a lot of people, say, oh, that's just a Band-Aid fix. I want to know what actually fixes. What am I doing in my swing that's causing this? There's not always something going on in your swing from a technical standpoint that's causing this, right? Golf is a game of precision. If you look at one swing and another swing, you look at swings where you were hitting it dead in the middle of the face, and you look at the swings that you're making now, you probably are not going to be able to tell any difference between the two. It's just that, you're not going to be able to tell the difference between a swing where you hit it half inch toward the heel and in the middle of the face. It's just not likely going to be much different. That's not always the case, but that's usually what I find. So it's about changing your intention. And people say, well, I don't want to do that's like a Band-Aid fix. I want to know how I actually fix it. It is the actual fix, though, because what we have to understand is that we're human. We're adaptable. We're not like robots, right? So if we are a robot, you would just kind of adjust the machine and then it would work correctly. But we're human. We're adaptable. We're not going to when we try to hit the ball off the heel, we're not always going to, when we try to hit the ball off the toe, we're not always going to hit it in the center of the face. Eventually, you're actually going to start hitting the ball off the toe. And when you start doing that, that's when you tone it down. And then you would just do drills to help you always stay honed in on the middle of the face, right? Because think about it this way, at one point, you're probably hitting it in the middle of the face, right? Well, there isn't something that happened, some revolutionary thing that happened in your swing that led to you hitting off the heel. It's just that we're human. We're adaptable. Sometimes we just, we get a little bit off and we got to recalibrate. And the way that we do that is we change our intention until feel becomes real. And then at that point, we would, do drills to do that. So real quickly, a very simple drill that you can do. I don't want to take up a ton of time on this, but really simple drill that you can do is once you get to where you're kind of calibrated and you're able to kind of get a feel for where it is, to get to where you're really dialed in with the sweet spot, you want to do skill level type training drills. If you're familiar with the Ball Striking Masterclass, this is a course that we offer every now and then on Top Speed Golf. It's an online course, but this is a skill building course, right? And one of the skills that we cultivate in there is your ability, the skill of hitting the ball in the sweet spot, controlling where you hit it in the middle of the face. So this is a very simple drill that's similar to drills that we do in that course. I can't remember if this is an exact drill, but this is often a drill that I give to students to help them with this. So with this, what we're going to do is we're going to use a concept that is called win, pass, lose, stay. What that means is if I'm successful with the task, meaning I win, then I pass and I'm going to move on to the next task, right? If I'm unsuccessful, meaning I lose, then I'm going to stay. I'm going to repeat the task. So win, pass, lose, stay. You're going to have 3 tasks with this drill. You're going to have the task of hitting it on the toe intentionally, hitting it on the heel intentionally, and hitting it in the middle of the face intentionally, right? And the way you kind of do that is use the dot method, use foot power spray, whatever you want to do, and split the club face into 3 sections, right? And the center of the strike has to land in the prescribed section. And before you hit the shot, you have to predetermine which one you're going for. So sometimes, people kind of try to cheat it a little bit. They don't predetermine it. They hit it off the toe and be like, that counts as my toe strike. That doesn't count, right? We have to predetermine it, right? And it doesn't matter what order you go in. Doesn't matter which one you start with first. It just matters that you predetermine which one you're doing. And then once you get that one, then you move on to the next one. So I'm just going to kind of walk through. Let's say I'm going through the drill. I'm going to say I'm hitting this one out of the middle of the face. I'm going for the center strike. And let's say the first one hit it off the heel, right? It was toward the heel. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make an adjustment. I'm going to maybe feel like I'm hitting a little bit toward the toe. I'm going to try again. Let's say on the next one, I overdo it. I get too much out the toe. So I got to try it again. I got to dial it down just a little bit. The next one, I get it in the middle of the face. So I've taken me 3 attempts, and now I can check mark the middle of the face. Now I can go the heel or the toe. Let's say I go to the heel on this one. Let's say I get it on the first try, right? So pass. Now I'm going to the toe strike. And then let's say I do that, and it takes me 2 tries to get off the toe, all right? So 3 for the center, 1 for the heel, and 2 for the toe. That's 6 total repetitions. That's my score. And now my goal is to beat that score. So I might, keep working through this drill and try to get to where I can get 3 out of 3 on this drill. If you can get 3 out of 3 on this drill, you're going to have a pretty good feel and awareness and skill and ability to hit the ball in the middle of the face when you want to. So that'd be a great drill for you to do. Now, one thing I would add to this before I move on to the next question here is if you happen to have a really hard time with one of them, right? So Alan, in your case, right, you're hitting it off the heel a little bit. That's kind of what you're naturally doing. So you may have a little bit of a hard time with the toe strikes, right? You might have a little hard time with that. It might take you 12 tries to get a toe strike, and then 1 or 2 tries for the other 2. If that's the case, then afterwards, what I would do is I would just spend a lot of time trying to hit it off the toe, trying to fix that bias, that toe bias, or that heel bias that you have, by trying to hit as many shots as you can off the toe. Try to see how many in a row you can get off the toe to kind of shift that bias more toward the middle of the face. So very, very simple drill that you can do to get much, much better at controlling where you're hitting it on the face. All right, let's keep it going. All right, I'm going to refill my drink here real quick while you guys are coming up with more questions. So bear with me here while I do that. Sorry, I just had to get a little hydrated here. Oh man, I got my fridge a little too cold. It's a little frosty. All right, so Kevin asked, watching a Clay video earlier, he said with the driver, the left elbow should be above the right. Is this the same for iron play 2, please? The left elbow should be above the right. At what point in the swing are you talking about, Kevin? If you want to give me a little bit more specifics there. Most likely, yes. It's not so much, what we have to understand with these shots is that it's not so much the club that you're hitting that we have to do certain things in the swing. It's the shot that you're hitting, right? So wedges, for example, right? Wedges. If if I'm hitting a flop shot versus a 50-yard pitch shot, right? Well, I'm using the same club, but it's going to be a very different swing for both of those, right? So it might not be the exact same thing. So you're asking on the downswing, the left elbow should be above the right. Yes. I mean, that's how you shallow out the club, right? If I'm like this, look what happens. If my right arm, assuming you're right-handed, right? We're talking about right-handed golfers. If I'm a right-handed golfer, if my right elbow is in front, it's going to be almost impossible to get this club to come down on a good plane down to the ball. It's almost guaranteed to be coming down steep when you do that. And that's regardless of any club that you're hitting. So if your intention with the shot is to shallow out the club, yes, we definitely want to have that right elbow underneath the left elbow. Because if I get my right elbow on top, right, if I'm like that, I mean, I can't imagine being able to get that club on the appropriate plane from there. So yes, that applies to any shot where you're really trying to get that club to work down on a good plane. No problem, Kev. Glad to help. So Elliot P says, "Hi Q, what type of golf swing release does the TSG system use?" The TSG system uses, now you said slap hinge. To be honest with you, I'm not familiar with what that is. Crossover, I assume you're meaning that your hands are kind of rolling over, and then push release. Again, I'm not familiar with what these terms are. But what Top Speed Golf believes is the straight line release. And the cool part about this is that probably all of those that you mentioned fall into the category of the straight line release, right? So that's kind of what the Top Speed Golf system is all about. It's all about the things that all the best players do. All the best players release the club out in front, right? A certain amount, right? I shouldn't say a certain amount, in a range, right? Most recreational golfers that I see release the club too early, right? And that's whether they're using any of the release, categories that you talked about. So really what it comes down to when at Top Speed Golf, when we're talking about the release, all we're talking about is when the club splits the forearms, right? So I'm coming in, and my club splits my forearms. I want my club to split my forearms where the club is out in front. On the average tour player is about 40 to 41 degrees out in front, and a good range is to be anywhere in the 27 to 55 degree range. Now, the good part is that most recreational golfers, like I said, most recreational golfers are releasing the club earlier than 27 degrees, but the good part is that we don't have to be at 40 degrees. As long as we're getting anywhere near that, it's going to be good for most golfers. And here's the reason why. Most recreational golfers just don't have the club head speed of tour players, right? The average tour player, male tour player, swings their driver 114 miles per hour, right? The average golfer, the average male golfer, swings their driver 95 miles an hour, right? So unless you're swinging 110 plus, it's not really, and even if you are, you can still play good golf being on that kind of low end of the release. But if you don't have a lot of club head speed, you kind of don't want to release the club super late because you may not have a very functional ball flight. What I mean by that is the ball may come out too low, and you may end up in a situation where you can't ever hit a green and hold it, because unless it's just like really soft or something, because it's coming in so low and so hot that it's just, it's not gonna hold the green. So if you're someone who doesn't want to hit the ball lower, I have a lot of students that come to me and they're like, I don't have enough shaft lean. I need more shaft lean. I need more shaft lean. right? Well, the first question that I ask is like, well, would you like to hit the ball lower? And a lot of times the answer is no, I actually would like to hit the ball higher. So if that is the case, then we really don't want to get more shaft lean, because if you want to hit the ball higher, getting more shaft lean is going to make you hit the ball lower, right? Now, you might hit it a little bit farther, possibly. Not everybody will. If you have enough club head speed, you will. But if you have a lot of club head speed and you're hitting these big sky balls and it's hard to control, you probably have a necessity to get some more shaft lean. But most recreational golfers just aren't in that situation. I have found just through many years of doing lessons with Top Speed Golf members that most golfers are in a situation where they actually want to hit the ball higher, right? And working on shaft lean is going to be detrimental to that. To be honest with you, if you just have some shaft lean, you're good, because that's going to allow you to have a functional ball flight. It's when we have backwards shaft lean, if we're coming into contact like this, that's backward shaft lean. From a physical standpoint, technical standpoint, you're going to have a really hard time making good contact with the ball. You're going to tend to hit the ground before the ball, or chunk it, thin it, top it, that sort of thing. So in order to be able to hit kind of down and through the ball, you want to get the hands a little bit more in front, to help you to hit down on it a little bit. So like I said, with the release, just kind of go back to that. With the release, what we're talking with Top Speed Golf, what we talk about is the club splitting the forearms. And whether it's any of those categories that you talked about, which again, I'm not really familiar with those, slap hinge, I think you mentioned crossover, push release, all of those. You can do any of those. As long as the club is splitting the forearms out in front, that's what the TSG fundamental is. And that's kind of what we're all about here. We're not all about the little things. We don't put ourselves into a corner like, hey, you have to do this. There's, 10% of the people on the PGA Tour, the highest level golfers, or any professional golfers, LIV or LPGA, Champions Tour, any of them, 10% of the golfers do this. You got to do it. Well, obviously, what about the other 90%? What we talk about, every single golfer does these things, right? In the ranges that we talk about. Every single golfer has a stable fluid spine. Every single golfer gets at least a 90-degree shoulder turn. Most of them get even more than that. Every single golfer gets some lag in the swing. There's no golfers that are just straight up casting the club when they're coming down. No golfers really bump their hip way out. All golfers have a good compression line. All golfers are releasing, their club somewhere in that range, 27 to 55 degrees. Obviously, there'll be some outliers here and there, but it's like 99%. So if we can do the things that 99% of golfers are doing, and then everything else is kind of your own swing signature, right? Because imagine, you look at somebody like a Scotty Scheffler, and then you look at somebody like John Rahm. Then you look at somebody like Rory McIlroy. I mean, these golf swings are so different. I mean, very, very different, right? But if you look at them and you hold them up to the Top Speed Golf system, they're all doing that, right? So what we abide by here, and what the message that Clay is trying to cultivate here at Top Speed Golf, is that we go by the Pareto principle, which basically it's the 80-20 rule, right? And if you're not familiar with that, what that means is that you're going to get a majority of your results from a small number of things, right? So you're going to get a majority of your results from the Top Speed Golf system, the 20-minute shadowing fix, the 20-minute distance fix, right? These are kind of the main things, for the full swing. If you can do these main things, then we're good. If we're really just trying to get a perfect slap hinge release, again, I'm not familiar with what that is, to be honest, or a perfect push release. Well, what if that's not something that you naturally do very well, and you're trying to put a like a square peg in a round hole, right? It's not gonna work very well. So I'm all about doing the things that we see all the best players do. Focus on those things, and you'll most likely be in a better position. All right. Thanks, everybody. We'll keep going here. Just want to make a quick note here. All right. So Steve D says, Q, with the same exact swing, I hit my irons to the left, but hit my buddy's iron straight. He has a flat lie angle. I have 2 degrees upright. In order to hit my iron straight, I have to take a weaker grip. However, I don't feel like I can press the ball as well with a weaker grip. And my upright irons versus taking a stronger grip with my buddy's flatter irons. Hold on. However, I don't feel like I can press the ball well with a weaker grip and my upright irons versus taking a stronger grip. Okay. Do you think I could get better compression with the flatter lie and stronger grip, or is this just my imagination? It's really hard to say on that one. The only thing you can really do is get yourself on like a launch monitor, like a TrackMan or something, and compare and contrast. Hit the two, and see what happens there. That's what I would recommend doing, because when I'm a firm believer that most people are going to adapt to their equipment, right? So, you can, you're weakening and strengthening your grip, but I don't know if it's just really hard to say, Steve. I wish I had like a concrete answer for you, but what I know that you can a way that you kind of figure it out is to get out, if you have a simulator or something, a place you can get on there and, get on TrackMan and hit both and see what happens, and, and go from there. It could be that maybe you've grown out of the 2 degrees upright. A lot of times people get their clubs set up a little bit more upright because maybe they're standing up out of it a little bit, right? And if you're not doing that, then you're not standing up out of it anymore. Well, now, because when you make a club more upright, it opens the face, or sorry, it closes the face. There he is. So let's say you have a flat lie angle club and that's square, right? And that's the way that you're hitting it. And then you get a club that's a little bit more upright, right? Well, now my face, if I get more upright, if I have a club that's more upright, and then I do that, it's going to be closed, right? If I have a club that's more flatter and I do that, it's going to be more open. So that can definitely make a difference for sure. It sounds to me like, the proof is kind of in the ball flight, right? You're seeing straight ball flight with your buddy's clubs. With your clubs, it's not the same, and you feel like you're making the same swing, right? So, really what it comes down to is test them, see what's going on there. If you're more comfortable with a stronger grip, as well, that might be something you do better. A lot of times, people with stronger grips will compress the ball more, because one of the things that helps you to get your hands more in front is to have the face more closed. If the face is more closed, then you have a necessity to get the hands more in front, right? So if you have a weaker grip, that's going to tend to have the face more open, which means you might tend to early release a little bit more, right? If you have a stronger grip, the face is going to tend to be more closed, which means you might get a little bit more shaft lean, right? So it's really hard to say, without actually seeing what's going on, getting on launch monitor, but that's what I would definitely recommend doing. It's probably not in your head. It could be like a one-time thing. That's just what happened that day. In, another day, it doesn't end up that way. But yeah, get yourself on a launch monitor, and test those things. Maybe consider, the good part is too, you can get your clubs changed. You can get your clubs set to standard lie, right? Because the way that they change that, they just put it into a machine and they just bend it, right? it gets put into this machine, and then they just kind of put something on it here, and they just kind of like tap it or kind of like pull it down until it basically bends, and then there you go. You get it to where it's a little bit flatter, right? So you can take your clubs and bring it to a club fitter and get them set up a little bit flatter. And the other thing is too is that sometimes your clubs can change lie angle over time just from getting hit so many times, right? Especially if it's like a softer metal. So if you have like a softer metal kind of iron, it's going to tend to be a little bit more malleable, and you can like move it around a little bit. So sometimes the lie angles on those can change a little bit. So you might have got them fit at like a 2-degree upright, but maybe they're more like a 4-degree upright now because of, if they're a softer metal. It's just something to kind of check out. But that's also a possibility. They could just be too upright for you now. But yeah, I would recommend, getting refitted. And then if you do, just, getting on the simulator maybe and checking it out, and then maybe just taking the clubs that you have now and just getting the lie angles changed to a little bit flatter than what you are now. All right, keep questions coming. We got plenty of time here. I'll be on here till about noon. So while you all are coming up with questions, I'm going to clean my glasses here real quick because they are smudged like crazy. Bear with me here. I got to clean these up a little bit. So while you guys are coming with questions, I'll do that real quick. By the way, if you wear glasses, these things are a lifesaver. So when I first got glasses like several years ago, it's probably about 10 years ago now. They give you, with your glasses, they give you these the little spray with the lint-free cloth. Well, I mean, after about a month or so of using that cloth is so gunky, and then it doesn't really work well anymore. So it might be a little bit more green or whatever, but then I got these things, just saw them online because I was like, there's got to be a better way, because I was like, I don't want to have to buy a bunch of lint-free things and then have to do that all the time. So, but then I got these, and these even clean your glasses better than the lint-free cloth and the spray. So I really like these. They're called Zeiss is the brand. Zeis, I think, or Z. I just tore it right through the middle, so I can't really see exactly what the brand is. Yeah, Zeiss, Zeiss. I think that's how you pronounce it. But yeah, awesome lens wipes. I always keep a few in the car. Keep them everywhere. You can buy I got like a 200 count. Might have been $10, but it lasts a long time. Think about how many times you might clean your glasses, right? I probably clean my glasses every other day. So like a box of 200 or I think it's a box of 220. That probably lasts about a year. To me, that's definitely worth it. And now I can see much better. All right, so like I said, keep the questions coming here. It's 11:34 right now, so we got 26 minutes or so left. So if you got your questions, let me know. If not, no worries. While you guys have come up with questions, I might see if maybe there were some questions from earlier office hours that maybe we can just talk about now. All right, yeah, so we can do this one. This is an interesting one. Type it in here. Bear with me here. I'm trying to find. right. There we go. All right, so JS says, is the first move from the top of the swing dropping the hands or side bend? Well, if I had to pick between the two, I would say dropping your hands. But really, the way that we want to start the downswing is from the ground up, right? We want to start it by feeling pressure moving into that lead foot and increasing in that lead foot. And the reason why I say, if I had to pick between the two, hands dropping or side bend, is because the side bend is a very gradual thing that happens from the top of the swing down to impact, right? So if you're not familiar with what side bend is, if you imagine if I keep my hips level and then I take my rib cage here and I tilt in my spine. So basically this is coming from your thoracic spine area, the middle of your spine. If I tilt my rib cage, you can see that that's side bend. I can tilt my rib cage that way. That's side bend, right? So when you go up to the top of the swing, you're going to go into some left side bend, right? And it's a gradual thing, right? I'm gradually moving more and more and more into left side bend as I turn in my backswing. And then as I come down the downswing as a right-handed golfer, again, I'm going to move toward right side bend. So at the top, I'm actually in left side bend, right? And then I'm going to move toward right side bend. So by about right here, I'm probably more in a neutral spine position. And then as I continue down, I'm going to go into more right side bend. What we don't want to do from the top of the swing is just go into a ton of right side bend, because what's going to happen is you're going to tend to hit the ground behind the ball, right? So that might look something like this, where I'm in left side bend. And then if I just do first thing, right side bend, well, look what's going to happen. My shoulder's going to drop way down, and I'm going to tend to hit the ground behind the ball. So definitely not right side bend or side bend in general to start the downswing, because it's a gradual thing. I don't mind the feeling of the hands dropping, because I feel like a lot of people tend to leave the arms up and rotate down. We definitely want to have those hands kind of work down as we're coming down in the downswing. So I don't mind that. That's not a bad feel to have. But again, for me, what starts the downswing is the initiation of that pressure in the lead foot, getting that pressure in the lead foot, getting our momentum moving forward, and then everything kind of starts to unwind from there. So our hips are starting to open up, right? My chest is starting to open up. My arms are lowered. My arms are lowering down. All those things are happening in sequence there. And it starts from the ground up, right? So that's really what we want to feel to start the downswing. But real quickly here, before we move on to the next question here, what I want to do is talk about how we can get a good feel for that for that proper side bend amount. So what you would do is very simply take an alignment stick and place it outside the ball roughly about 4 feet. And if you're not sure what 4 feet looks like, alignment sticks are usually about 4 feet. If you buy the ones like from home improvement stores, they're exactly 4 feet. If you buy it from a golf score, it's usually a little bit shorter. It's like 2 inches short of 4 feet, but it's okay if you just have it. It doesn't have to be exactly 4 feet. There's nothing magical about 4 feet. It's just about 4 feet. But this is going to help you to get a good feel for that. So I'm going to take that alignment stick. I'm going to lay it flat on the ground, parallel to my toe line, 4 feet on the other side of the ball. So I'm going to get in my address position with this ball. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to remain in my address position, but I'm going to take this club and I'm going to put it on my shoulders. Now, when you put it on your shoulders, put it high on your shoulders. It should basically be up against your neck and then level on your shoulders here. So the reason why that is that if we, like I said, hold it like kind of like mummy style like this. So that's why I call it mummy style. If you hold it like this, it just makes it difficult. And then you pull your shoulders back. And then some people hold it in their elbow pits. It's just going to make it, you're not going to get an accurate representation of where your shoulders are pointing when you do that. So try to put it like on top of your shoulders and up against your neck and kind of level on your shoulders there. So now, again, I'm going to get my address position. I'm going to stay in my posture here, put that club across my shoulders. And then what I want to imagine here is like there's a laser coming out the butt end of this club. And I want that laser to track down that stick, right? and and that's in the backswing. In the downswing, I want to imagine there's a laser coming out of this end, and then that's tracing that line down the stick. So it helps me. I want my shoulders to kind of move on a very similar plane, to rotate on a very similar plane, right? I don't want the plane to change a ton, right? So if I'm here, again, I'm in my posture, I'm going to rotate down. You can see that that's going to be pointing down, and then it's just tracing that all the way down. And then when I come down, I'm almost want to feel like this replaces where this was, right? And then I'm rotating down, and then that's pointing more down toward that as well. So if you imagine, if I were to go up to the top and then go into too much right side bend too early, well, then I would go like this. And now if there's a laser coming out of this, it's tracing a line that's more like this, right? Instead of parallel with my toe line. One last thing here, what I would say is if you read Ben Hogan's book, The 5 Lessons, one thing he talks about in there that I really like was the plane of glass. That's a good way to kind of also feel about side bend. Now, it's a little bit exaggerated, a little bit more exaggerated than what's actually going on, but I think it's a good visual because most people don't have their shoulder plane steep enough. Most people, their shoulder plane is too flat, right? So I think this is a good visual and exaggeration for a lot of people to do. So again, if I'm set up like this, and you imagine, I'm in my posture here, and you imagine like there's a plane of glass right here. So that plane of glass goes down to the ball, and then it's sitting on top of my shoulders, right? And you imagine my head is like kind of going through a hole in the glass, and that glass is sitting on top of my shoulders. What I want to imagine is that my shoulders rotate on that plane of glass, right? So again, if I just go into right side bend too early, well, look what happens. My lead shoulder goes up, my right shoulder goes down, and now I'm breaking that glass and moving into that glass. I want my shoulders to rotate on that same kind of plane. So that can help you to be able to get the club and come down on a good plane. So I think that's a good visual. Like I said, technically it's not really like that. It's more a few feet like that outside. But I think that's a good visual for most people to have for how the shoulder should be moving. All right, let's keep going here. I think I heard a little sound that it makes when somebody asks a question. So Louis says, would the angle of the club shaft on hybrid be the same as driver or more like the 6-iron? What do you mean the angle of the club shaft? Like the lie angle? Or can you give me a little bit more clarity on that? On what exactly the angle of the club shaft? The lie angle is going to be probably closer to a 6-iron for most hybrids because the lie angle is going to be pretty flat for a driver because the club is so much longer. Angle of the club shaft. Oh yeah, it's going to be much closer to. So you're talking about like the vertical swing plane, basically. That's what it sounds like. So let me kind of show you this. And maybe you're asking because you have a blue brick and you're not sure which one to put it in. But basically, if you're not familiar with what the blue brick is, this is a training aid that Clay invented. It's made by Shotcraft. And there's drills that you can do on here for shallowing. And we have different numbers on here. We got driver, 6-iron, and wedge. And really, the wedge and the 6-iron are very similar. They're only like a couple degrees different from each other. And with the tolerances and stuff with this, when you put the sticks in there, they may look like the exact same, right? But the driver is quite a bit flatter, right? So the driver is or the 6-iron is like 60 degrees. If sand wedge is going to be like 62-ish degrees, and then driver is like 45 to 50. So if I put this in here, put this down, and I put the sticks in those different ones, you kind of see the difference. So I'll put this one in the 6-iron, and then I'll put this one in the driver. And you can see how it's a lot flatter, right? Now a hybrid is going to be a lot closer to this, right? Because it really comes down to kind of the length of the club, right? Your driver is just so much longer than all the other clubs, other than like the 3-wood. Like a 3-wood is like 2 inches shorter than a driver, but everything else is quite a bit shorter. I don't have a full bag in here to kind of show you, but with a driver versus a wedge, I mean, it's like a foot, it's like a whole grip length difference between the two. So this is like an approach wedge, basically. You can see it's almost an entire grip longer. And this is really just a standard length driver. So that's why it's a lot flatter. The angle is a lot flatter because this is a lot longer of a club. So what I would say, if you're using the blue brick, when the driver setting is going to be used for driver and 3-wood, right? And for 3-wood, I'd maybe just move it a little bit farther away from it, since it is just a little bit shorter of a club. Pretty much everything else can be in the 6-iron slot, and then wedges, I would just use the sand wedge slot, any wedge. So anything from a sand wedge to a pitching wedge, I just put it in the sand wedge slot. But like I said, the 6-iron hole and the 7, or in the wedge hole, the sand wedge hole, are very, very similar. But yeah, that's how I practice it. And really, the way you can kind of look at this is if you look at your swing on video and you draw something called the shallowing line. The shallowing line, the shallowing line is the line that goes from the ball up to the middle of the elbow when you're looking from down the line. And also remember, we have to have a good camera angle for that to be accurate. If you don't have the camera set up down the toe line, hip level, and far away enough to where you and the club stay in the frame, you will not get an accurate representation of the shallowing line. So you just got to have a little bit of attention to detail with that to be able to do that. You know, the first few times you set it up correctly, you're going to have to really think through it. But every time after that, it's probably going to be pretty easy to set it up because, just because you're just getting used to doing it. But like I said, down the toe line, hip level, far away enough to where you and the club stay in the frame. If I draw a line from the ball up to the middle of my elbow, that is going to very, very closely resemble the angle of those sticks, right? It should be almost exactly parallel to it. Now, if you're someone who's really tall, your shallowing line might be a little bit more upright. So you might consider, if you're using the blue brick, to maybe shim it a little bit to where it's a little bit more upright. So you can do that easily. Like you take like a scorecard, fold it and kind of shove it underneath whatever part of the brick needs to be propped up to make it more upright or flatter. On the other side of that, if you're someone who's shorter, if you're 5'3", these angles might be a little bit too upright for you, right? So you might need a little bit flatter. You can shim the other side of it to make it a little bit flatter, right? So really what we're trying to resemble here is that shallowing line, and the stick kind of represents that shallowing line. And if you put that a little bit outside of where your shallowing line is and you swing underneath it, you'll be very close to where you need to be, right? So that's why it's a really valuable tool. And unlike many out there, as far as convenience is concerned, there's all kinds of drills you can do to shallow out the club, but by far, to me, in my opinion, the blue brick is the best one. And you might say, well, Q, you work for Top Speed Golf. You're just saying that because you work here and you probably get paid to say that. I don't actually. I don't. I just think it's a great tool. I don't get an extra penny. I don't get any extra money in my paycheck if they sell 100 extra bricks this month just because I said it's great. I just say that it's great because it is great. I use it with a lot of students. A lot of my students that have it, and a lot of my students that have it are making great improvements in what they're working on because of it, because there's just lots of drills that you can do. I would say mostly, in full disclosure here, most of the drills that I'm doing with the blue brick are the shallowing drills, because that's just something a lot of people struggle with. But I'm seeing a lot of people make great improvements working it, much more than before the brick was out there. It was sometimes a struggle when the brick wasn't out there, because I would try to get them to do like a stick drill. A lot of students would do a stick drill, but sometimes it's hard to know exactly how to set it up. And the blue brick just makes it a lot easier because it just puts it at that perfect angle. So you've probably seen in the past, and Clay was probably inspired by the swing plate to make the blue brick. But this is the swing plate. It's a similar. You can do very similar drills with the swing plate that you can with the blue brick, but it's more versatile in the sense that I can put this at any angle I want, right? But it's less convenient in the sense that I got to know what those angles are, right? The blue brick knows what the angles are because they're engineered into it, right? The holes are cut to be at these perfect angles. So you kind of have to find the angles with this. So I imagine, I don't know for sure what Clay's inspiration was for the brick or anything like that, but I imagine he saw this and was like, man, I like this, but it would be a lot easier if maybe it was like that. And that may have been what inspired it. But you could do it with this. But again, I would have trouble with it because students would set it up too upright, and they would still be coming over the top and things like that. So I like the blue brick because it's kind of like a set it and forget it kind of thing, like the old school infomercials from back in the day. What was that thing? It was like some rotisserie chicken cooker thing. Set it and forget it. That's kind of what the blue brick is. This you can't just put it in here and you have to actually know what the angle is and all that stuff. And you notice there is a pool noodle on this. Highly recommend it. Pool noodle makes it a little bit probably a little bit safer. Protects the stick. Now, it's not necessarily, you can certainly break the stick if the pool noodle is on there. It's just that it's going to break inside of the noodle instead of, if the noodle wasn't there, it might break outside of it, and then you got a stick flying somewhere, possibly could damage your clubs and things like that. So definitely recommend getting a pool noodle. They're usually a couple bucks at any place that sells pool supplies. All right, I heard the sound. Let's see if we got a new question here. All right, so Steve D says, Q on the downswing. When the shaft is parallel with the ground, should the shaft also be parallel with my toe line or still coming from slightly from the inside of the toe line? That depends on a few factors. If it is parallel with your toe line, you're typically going to be in a pretty good spot. It also depends on the ball flight that you're going for, right? If you're going for more of a draw ball flight, you might want it to be a little bit more inside. So for those of you who aren't familiar with what he's talking about, club parallel to the ground in the downswing, right? So this moment, right? So when I'm right here, if I have this stick down representing my toe line, all right, where do I want my club pointing? So I would say definitely, if I'm wanting to hit like a draw, I definitely want it to be pointing a little bit to the right of where my toes are pointing, like the butt end of my club, right? If I'm wanting to hit more of a draw ball flight. If I'm wanting to hit more of a fade ball flight, relative to your toes, it doesn't necessarily, but relative to the target line, it needs to be a little bit outside to promote a little bit of an out to in path. So basically I can set up like this, and relative to my toe line, that club might be perfectly in line with my toe line, but since my toe line is pointing to the left, that can help me get my path to my left and be able to hit a fade. But if I'm lined up with my toes at the target and I want to hit a draw, I want to have it a little bit inside. If I want to have a little bit more neutral, you could probably have it maybe a hair inside. Some of it depends on how you're coming through contact, right? So if I have shaft lean, if I have a lot of shaft lean, I can have it more inside. And the reason is that when you have more shaft lean, meaning your hands are going to be more ahead, well, your hands are going to be working more ahead and then to the left around your body. So the more your hands kind of work to the left, the more your path is going to tend to work to the left. So if I have a lot of shaft lean, right, at impact, if I have like pro level shaft lean, where I'm coming into impact and I'm like this, my hands are basically in front of my lead thigh, I probably want to have it a little bit behind if I want like a neutral, kind of club path, because as my hands work to the left, right, that club is going to want to work to the left as well. If I don't have a lot of shaft lean at impact, let's say I'm coming into contact, I'm maybe like this, right? Maybe I have some shaft lean, but not a lot, not as much as a high-level pro player. And as I mentioned earlier, we don't need to have crazy high levels of shaft lean, especially if we don't have a ton of club head speed. A lot of times, it's better to not have a ton of shaft lean if you're not swinging at the speed of a high-level tour player, because you may not have the speed to support that. You may end up hitting the ball too low and not have a very functional ball flight. So if you're in that situation where maybe you have some shaft lean, but it's not a ton, and you're actually in a good spot, you probably want to have it to where it's a little bit more in line. So what you can do, what I would recommend doing is I think this would be a fantastic exercise for anybody, especially you, Steve, since you asked the question, is I would go out to the range and video your swing. Make sure that you have the camera set up perfectly down the toe line and at hip level and far away enough to where you and the club stay in the frame throughout the entire swing. Make sure that the camera angle is good. Use a swing analysis program, something like the OnForm app. This is what we use for online lessons. Use that. Very, very convenient app to use. It's available for Apple and Android devices. And video your swing and make a note of the ball flight. You know, what happens when your club is more like this at club parallel? What was the ball flight? And I would also monitor the strike on the face. Use foot powder spray, sprayed on the club face. This is Dr. Scholl's Odor X blue and yellow can. You get it at Walmart, $5-6. Use that sprayed on the face. You can also use the dot method, dry erase marker. Put a dot on the ball, fill it with ink. Set up that dot to rub off on the face when you hit it, so that way you can see if it was because if it's a center face strike, then you really want to see, okay, where's my club at and what kind of ball flight did I get, right? If it's an off center strike, then it may throw off the data a little bit, because if you don't hit the ball in the middle of the face, your start line and ball flight after the start line can be very different, right? I can make the same exact swing, hit one off the heel, hit one off the toe with the exact same face angle and club path, the club in the exact same position here, coming down, and you'll get two very different ball flights, right? So that's why you definitely want to check the strikes. So check the strikes on center face strikes. See what happens with your ball flight when it's a little bit more in, right? See what happens with your ball flight when it's perfectly in line. See what happens with your ball flight when it's a little bit outside, right? See what happens with those, and that's going to help you to figure out exactly where you need to be, because there isn't one spot really where everyone needs to be, because everyone's swing is a little bit different. It's about the results that you're getting. So I would say in general, in line with it is going to be a good spot. Anywhere close to in line with your toe line is generally going to be a very, very good spot to be. After that, you might be splitting hairs a little bit, but generally it's going to be a very good spot to be for most people. All right. Maybe we got 2 minutes left here. Might wrap up since we don't have we don't have any questions left here. So again, thanks everyone for joining me. Just a reminder, you can ask your questions at any time. Anytime. You do not have to wait until the office hours are live to ask your questions. You can ask your questions live at any time, and it will be answered live during the next office hours. So let's say, we shut down the office hours here in a minute or two, and you're later today, you're like, oh, I wish I would have asked you this. You can come in to this office hours page and type your question. Now, it won't get answered till Monday at 5 p.m. That's when we start. But you can tune in at 5 p.m. Or if you happen not to be able to tune in at 5 p.m. on Monday, then you can see the archived office hours. Now, the archived office hours, we're working on making that more accessible. It's not the easiest thing to get to right now. We are actively working. There might be somebody working on it right now. I know somebody was working on it yesterday. So we're working on getting that to be a little bit more navigatable. Is that navigatable? Is that the right word? And because right now you got to go office hours, or you got to go instruction tab, then drop down, and then office hours. And then from the drop down there, you got to do office hours highlights. Then you got to scroll all the way to the bottom of that office hours highlights page. And it's like, it's just it's not the easiest thing to go to. So I'm working with our team, and our team's working on getting that to be a little bit better. So that way, if you happen to miss office hours, you can easily just, come in and see your question. So anyway, hopefully everybody has a great weekend. We'll be back here Monday, 5 p.m. Eastern time. Have a great weekend. We'll talk to you next time.